Okay, so today my colleagues and I are going to talk about AI tools to support transitions to mandatory climate disclosure reporting. This work is underpinned by two significant shifts that we've recently observed. One of these shifts is the upcoming introduction of mandatory climate disclosure reporting by companies in Australia and in other countries. The other shift relates to the recent advancements in the capabilities of generative AI tools such as ChatGPT. Our talk will explore how AI-based tools could be deployed to support various actors in the disclosure system in adapting to the new requirements. In terms of the outline of our talk, I'll start by introducing Australia's proposed mandatory climate disclosure system and some of the challenges that it creates for different participants. Scott will then describe how a hypothetical AI-based tool could assist users in generating, analysing, and verifying climate disclosures. Lastly, Cara will discuss how companies, external auditors, and financial analysts could use the tool in their work within the disclosure system. Australia's mandatory disclosure system will be introduced at the start of next year. It will require companies to produce an additional annual report containing their climate-related financial disclosures. In its first year of operation, the system will only cover Australia's largest companies, but then over the next few years, it will expand to require over 6,000 entities to report. While some of the system's details are still being finalised, the intention is that it will be aligned with international baseline disclosure standards. This means that Australia's system should be quite similar to the systems that other jurisdictions have introduced or are planning to introduce. The government has two objectives in introducing this system. The first is to provide investors with reliable information about companies' climate-related risks to inform investment decisions. This in turn provides an incentive for companies to improve their management of these risks. The second objective is to provide regulators with the information they need to assess and manage the long-term risk that climate change poses to the financial system. A key aspect of the proposed system is that the disclosures will be subject to external audit and assurance, like any other financial disclosure in companies' financial reports. This contrasts with Australia's existing voluntary disclosure system, where there is no auditing of the disclosures. The new system imposes substantial reporting obligations on companies. One of the main reporting requirements is that the entity disclose any climate-related risks that could reasonably be expected to affect its prospects, as well as the anticipated effects of these risks on its business model, value chain, and financial position and performance in the short, medium, and long term. This requirement alone is quite onerous given the diversity of climate-related risks that many companies face. These risks can include the impact of physical climate-related hazards such as extreme heat and droughts on the entity's operations, supply chains, and insurance costs. And the risks can also include the risks that the company's strategies for reducing their emissions, for example, through the use of carbon offsets or the use of new technologies, will be ineffective. Given these challenges, Australian company directors have several concerns about the difficulty of meeting the proposed disclosure requirements. And we expect that these concerns also apply to other actors in the system, such as external auditors and financial analysts, many of whom have little experience in working on climate disclosures. Recent advances in the capabilities of large language models could enable the development of tools to support actors in overcoming some of these difficulties. These models have been used to develop many new types of chatbot, including the widely used ChatGPT, which produce new text in response to natural language prompts. These bots have been found to be effective at retrieving and summarizing information from different knowledge bases, analyzing documents, and answering questions. These are the types of capabilities that are likely to be useful to different actors in Australia's mandatory disclosure system in adapting to the new reporting requirements. I'll now pass on to Scott, who will describe how a hypothetical tool based on an LLM could work in the context of climate disclosure reporting.
Great. Thanks, David. So we're going to talk about a hypothetical company, something like Green Future Energy, and describe a tool, EcoVerify, which is our LLM-based chatbot. Should just kind of give an illustration of what we're talking about here and how this might work. So we could have a company, Green Future Energy, that wants to transition its portfolio, which is based heavily in things like fossil fuels, to renewable energy. In its climate disclosure report, it sets a target of something like 100% renewable energy by 2035 and 80% reduction in emissions within the next decade. And it needs to report how it's going to do that in its climate disclosure to comply with regulations. So obviously, doing this kind of thing is going to require a lot of technical decisions, and having a tool like EcoVerify, which is able to analyze the document, will be really useful. So I'll talk about a few of the kind of hypothetical things that could happen under the hood here. So the first thing, of course, is within a disclosure document, there's going to be many claims that lay out how a company is going to go about doing the thing it wants to do. So for example, in the case of Green Future, they might describe how they're going to decommission many of their fossil fuel assets and install and deploy many renewable energy assets like wind farms or solar parks or something like that. They would probably describe where those things are going to happen and have a lot of technical detail. So the first thing, of course, would be actually pulling out those key details from the report. So identifying what's an important detail for that transition and what's less important, so that we can then validate some of those claims. So we can imagine the first step here would be extracting those claims from the report. And the next thing here, David. So the next thing is, of course, being able to retrieve information from a variety of sources. So once you have those claims, you want to be able to examine how those claims sit within the broader context than just the report. So being able to access the internet, which a lot of chatbots are able to do these days, or being able to access documents, technical documents like the scientific literature or other reports from other companies, maybe the company's own report, so that you can take those claims and then compare them to other data that exists from a variety of sources. And being able to just surface some of the relevant context could be important, especially in the case of, say, Green Future wants to put in a wind farm in a certain place. Being able to access data that is relevant to the place that the wind farm is going to go, and a lot of the technical or maybe economic details around that. And so, of course, having a bunch of data at our hands is really important, but also being able to analyze that data is going to be very relevant as well. So being able to take data from a variety of sources. So this could include looking at a company's historical emissions and looking how they're tracking over time, being able to potentially project those into the future to compare that to how the company is making claims about what they're going to do for their transition, but also just looking at how, if they're putting this hypothetical solar farm in a certain place, being able to analyze some of the potentially climate risks that are associated with that, or projecting in the future what socioeconomic requirements are going to surround the kind of that kind of implementation, to make sure that the projections or the claims that companies are making for their transition pathway are actually rooted in what is feasible technically and socially and economically. And so all of that coming together, this theoretical large language model tool, EcoVerify, would be able to process the information, map out where the company sits currently in its climate risk, map out the different pathways that it's projecting it to take to get to its the destination of minimum climate or mitigated climate risk, and then evaluate all of those different strategies so that it could and provide information to the auditor, whoever is reading these reports, so that they have a firmer understanding of the context around which these transition strategies are being implemented, to see how feasible those are. And I'll pass it over to Cara to talk about how different users could be using a tool like this.
Thank you, Scott. So one intent of this research was to come up with a few use cases or situations where the LLM technology could support multiple actors within the climate disclosure system. And so we focus on areas where the human actor and the AI have their greatest strengths. And we avoid areas that have known weaknesses or that are prone to bias. We also focus on those opportunity areas that Scott's just outlined, where we could reuse that functionality at multiple points in the system. Our paper identifies 3 cases. First, at the level of companies and generating a report. The second case is assuring claims and auditing large quantities of reports. And the third focuses on investors who are needing to assess climate-related risks and transition plans at a systemic level. I'll speak to each case, highlighting where the LLM functionality can satisfy knowledge gaps, support information-related tasks, and provide quality assurance. So we'll start with the situation of generating a report. We know in talking to some accountants and report creators that they're challenged by questions related to how to interpret climate data, the regulations, and identifying what sort of options they have when it comes to renewables. This is a place that an LLM tool can help. The LLM tool can also quickly interrogate otherwise siloed information, maybe about the company's operations, scenarios of climate change, and the regulations themselves. This opens up an opportunity to support the company in generating content for the report. Related in how a quality report may be produced, this hypothetical tool is well suited to review a draft report and give some indication of completeness and readability. Once the disclosures are mandatory, we imagine that there's going to be more reports than auditors available to complete compliance activities. And so for this use case, we've identified several ways that the demand for auditing reports may be met. There are knowledge gaps. An LLM tool could, for example, retrieve information about what risks are being reported by other companies and provide examples where renewables have been deployed or offsets have been used in a robust way. Perhaps the most obvious opportunity is to leverage LLM technology to rapidly process report content against the standards and provide a signal to the auditor of where further investigations may be needed. And here, we're supporting compliance checks at scale. Finally, we envisioned that the chatbot style of interrogation could be quite useful in helping an auditor investigate the logic within the report or the claims within the report. In the final use case, we'll look at the investor as a key actor in the system. And here they're interested in collections of reports as they need to consider multiple dimensions of climate-related risk over different timescales and different plausible climate futures. There are similar knowledge gaps to what we saw in the auditing use case. Here, an AI assistant can provide context and information on demand. With that potential, we could improve investor literacy about risk across sectors and geographies. That upskilling, combined with data now available with submitted reports, it puts investors in a better position to perform complex assessments. And as far as we've investigated, that's not been previously possible. The ability to perform robust assessments, it allows investors and financiers to mitigate systemic risk and focus on those opportunities that are best aligned with responsible, sustainable transitions. We'll provide just a few takeaway points as we wrap up the presentation. The transition to mandatory climate reporting and the emergence of new language technologies, it's happening now, and we envision areas of both disruption and opportunity. We've explored human-AI pairing opportunities within the system and identified a few areas where the strengths of the user and the AI can be combined or integrated. And this should be considered a first preliminary step in further solution development. Top of mind for this team is the need to consider how to develop AI responsibly and in an equitable way. Finally, we were eager to share this first step, given that other countries are in a similar boat. And while we're in that similar boat, we feel that the use cases that we've outlined may help others consider where AI is best positioned rather than where it's most readily available. Responsibility regarding future science and technology is the top priority of the research program that funded this pilot discovery work, and we look forward to continuing the conversation with members of this forum. Thank you.